Hello everybody. Welcome to IRC. We're here for a half-day retreat. So this is something we don't do too often, but we're going to do a half-day retreat today with Matthew Brensilver will be teaching. But is our tradition, as we've been doing sort of smaller retreats out of IRC, is to spend 10 minutes in the beginning where one of the RVs, and in that case that will be me, will kind of give you a quick tour of the place, show you some aspects of IRC that you may or may not have seen before. I'm Doug Wiebe, so I'm the facilities manager at IRC and one of the resident volunteers. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look through some facilities aspects. So facilities, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, but for those of you who didn't hear that one, facilities covers a vast array of things at IRC. I mean, I think of it as everything that's not green. It's not green and growing, falls under the facilities umbrella. So that includes all the maintenance, all the little repairs that need to be done, all the big repairs that need to be done, and just keeping, the physical facility running and operational for retreats. So for instance, yesterday I was up on the roof fixing the roof. Recently we did some work on the septic system. You can't see it because it's underneath the driveway here, but underneath the driveway is some of our septic work. So we had to have that torn up and redone. So we do a whole variety of things. So today what I'm going to do is we're going to take you through the basement, because the basement in some ways is one of the core places. You know, it's got the infrastructure that facilities work on. So we'll take a look at the basement. But before we do that, I wanted to show you quickly the electric panel, because the last time I talked about the backup generator that we're redoing, but the backup generator ultimately feeds into the electric panel. And the electric panel is something that is sort of a major project right now. In fact, electricity inside IRC is the major facilities project. So we're redoing the backup generator, we're redoing the wiring from the backup generator into IRC, but maybe most excitingly, we're going to be putting solar panels on the roof. And so with those solar panels, that means all our electricity will be powered by the sun. And so we will become a much cleaner operation, cleaner energy. And so part of it is the backup generator, part of it is redoing the electric panel, because currently we don't have the electrical capacity to be able to fully power us from solar panels. And just in general, we need a larger electrical capacity, because as we go into the 21st century, there's going to be a lot more electricity that's needed at any given place. And if we can power that through electric solar panels, all the better. So just a quick look in here. You'll see the old panel here. I'm not quite sure when that was put in, but I want to say, 80s, 90s, something like that. In any case, it's been around a while. It's done a great job, but it's outmoded as we're expanding our electrical needs. So we're putting in a new panel right here, and the new panel will allow us to hook into the solar panels, and will just allow us more electrical capacity within the building itself. All right, so let's go take a look through the basement. So many of you may have been on retreats at IRC before, but I'll bet a large number of you have not been into the basement. So we'll take a quick look here. This is the garage, and the garage hasn't parked cars for a long, long time. It's really kind of the central place for facilities to do their work. So we keep tools here, we keep odds and ends, various pieces of equipment that we use to repair things if we need it for quick repairs. We inherited a lot of these tools when we actually got here. And then there have been 2 or 3 facilities managers for me, and each of them have their own particular desires for tools. So it's kind of been a layering process of acquiring tools. Of course, you know, whenever you need that magic screwdriver that's going to fix a specific problem, you can't find it. But that's part of what being a facilities manager means. But generally, we're pretty well equipped. So let's walk through quickly. You'll see various tools, various, you know, plumbing things, electrical things, power tools. And then I want to take a quick peek in here, because this is one of these sort of magic places that I never, you know, I've been coming to IRC for years, and I had no idea that we even had something like this. So this is our water recirculator. So what it does is it takes the hot water, which is produced on the other side of this wall, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. It takes the hot water and circulates it through the building. So that means that hot water is available throughout. If you're up on the second floor, you don't have to wait 20 minutes for hot water to come through your shower. And just generally kind of evens out the water temperature throughout the building. So we've actually got two of them. And, you know, like I say, this was one of these mysterious places I never understood was here before. All right, so let's keep going through the basement. We'll walk through the garage here and into the basement. As I say, many of you have not been down here, and even those that have haven't probably poked your head in all of the different places. As you see, we're passing by an entry here. We've got a mail desk here where a lot of the packages get dropped off. This is the stairway to upstairs. So if you have come down, you come down the stairway. And then we'll take a quick peek through here. So this is the laundry room. And inside here are the water heaters. So these are the water heaters that on the other side of the wall are getting recirculated. Here are the heaters just for the heating system inside the building. And then these are a number of electrical panels. You'll see, I mean, there's a lot of them, but we're running out. We don't have space for more electricity in the building. So that's why we're doing these main panels, so that we can build some more sub panels. All right, so we'll walk back out here and show you a couple more things in the basement. So around this side is kind of RV territory. It's kind of a space where RVs can come to and sort of socialize as a group, do some eating. We've got a mail room here. This is where the RVs get their mail. Facilities office. One of the facilities offices we've turned into a bedroom for yogis on retreats. We're trying to make use of every nook and cranny we can to get people in. And then this room, kind of interesting, this is what powers and operates the elevator. So for those of you who've used the elevator, this is sort of the infrastructure around the elevator. So we'll keep moving here. The council room. So the council room is sort of the main living room area for the RVs. We'll take a quick walk through there. So you'll see living room, couches. And there's the kitchen area over here where we do cooking when retreats aren't going on. Dining area. So again, it's just sort of a place for RVs to come, relax, and socialize. And so we're through the basement. We're back out roughly where we started. There's the electric panel, and that's your tour for today. So thank you for joining me on this. And in a minute, I'm going to turn you over to Matthew Brensilver for the main event. But just to remind everybody that after the retreat, for 30 minutes, we'll have some community time. And I believe that there's a Zoom link on the YouTube page. So if you follow that link, afterwards, the password is community, all lowercase. We'll have 30 minutes of kind of an ability, just a chance to chat, check in with other people who've done the retreat, compare notes. So that'll be afterwards. So next up is Matthew Brensilver. Are you out there, Matthew?
I
Hello,
think
Matthew.
I think I am. Am I out there?
I'm glad to hear it.
Okay, good.
I'm going to
Good.
turn it over.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Doug. Yeah, so welcome, folks. Yeah, thank you for the tour, Doug. That you all get to see that when we say paticca samuppada, when we say like a retreat is a dependent co-arising, right? That a retreat is many different forces converging in a particular way. We're serious, right? It depends on so much on the electrical panels, on the hot water recirculating. What even is that? I didn't know about that. And it depends on the good hearts of many, and that's what we call Sangha, and that's what enables a retreat. And so I'm grateful to see all of that, and to be with you, and to have a chance to be together in the convergence of conditions that lead us to this moment. And so we'll make a few reflections, and we'll sit, walk, sit, have a talk, and some discussion. And then at noon Pacific time, you'll have the invitation to join a small group if you like. So yeah, welcome. I was speaking with a friend, a practitioner, and a couple of days ago, and she was describing her experience of some loneliness, and that is I think profound for many folks now these days. It's like sort of hitting different phases, different plateaus in this kind of inflection point in our history. And I thought back to, it was the day after Christmas in 2014, and I was teaching a group in San Francisco, and because it was after Christmas, we were moved from the main hall down to the basement. And but I wanted to have a group, even though it was the day after Christmas, just because it felt like an important time for people to be able to gather. And we're in this basement, kind of like packed into this pretty small basement, and people kind of spilling out, and sitting, kind of on floors and on piano, seats, and all over. And I remember I got this question from one of a kind of dedicated yogi. Can you share about working with loneliness? And I sort of paused, and I thought, kind of sense in, what do I actually know about this? Like, what do I know that's useful? And in that moment of fielding that question, there was a kind of recognition: I don't know enough to answer this question. Not that I never have the experience of loneliness. It's more that loneliness is a very slippery mind state. And I felt ill-equipped to actually give an answer sourced from my own wisdom. And my response was, come back to me in a year. I promise I'm going to try to learn something more about the Dharma of loneliness this year. And next time, next Christmas, I'm going to have an answer. Now, I forgot about that pledge, yeah. And, but he didn't. And so in the next year, he said, a year ago, you said you would know something about loneliness. What do you know? What what have you learned? And I again had to cop to well, not so much. It slipped out of my view. And on the one hand, in reflecting about it, in one sense, I'm not often lonely. It's pretty rare that I would have explicit, oh, this is loneliness. But from another perspective, I think there are subtle forms of loneliness that propel me into action often, every day. Yeah. And as I reflected on it, I sort of landed on the sense that that something very important to actually learn to study about loneliness, because in a way, dukkha is loneliness. We're maybe more familiar with the reverse, yeah, like loneliness is dukkha, loneliness is suffering, but dukkha, suffering, is loneliness, right? I think just about all species of suffering, the sense of separation and isolation and loneliness, a kind of longing for something, to be reunified with something, is present in many of those mind states. So we might consider the ways in which dukkha is loneliness. And Dharma practice is connection. Yeah. Dharma practice to a large extent is connection. And this arises in many ways. It arises as we approach rather than retreat from experience. There is connection to sensory experience. There is the companionship of awareness. Yeah. Comes to feel some kind of we're in solidarity with awareness. And there is the friendship of Dharma. It's almost like over the years of practice, the Dharma's taken on this character as something as not exactly my imaginary friend, but a little, yeah, a little bit like this breathing, pulsing presence in my life. And of course, there is Sangha. Yeah, we are doing this together, and that it's mediated by technology is actually not so important. It's always mediated by something, by our own perceptions. It's all virtual reality, right? But it's there's still the kind of palpable sense of intimacy. And I feel it right now looking into the webcam. Yeah, I feel that much different than if you weren't there. Yeah. So in this kind of field, in this mediated by technology, but it's always, even if we were in IRC's hall, it'd be mediated by our minds. In this field, we kind of sit in each other's minds. I was heard an interview a few week ago or something with it was Terry Gross and Andre Holland, who is Shakespearean actor, kind of quite remarkable, and he's maybe best known from playing the adult Kevin in the film Moonlight, Chiron's high school friend and lover. And if you know that film, it is extremely intimate, exquisite scenes that finish that film. And so I knew him from that. I heard this interview talking about Shakespearean work that he's doing, and was quite struck. And it had this deep parallel with how I feel about Dharma. And so Terry Gross says, like, has your understanding of what a soliloquy, what the kind of Shakespearean speech is, has that changed over the years? I've come to think of it as a kind of voiceover in a film, a first-person narration where someone's telling you their inner thoughts instead of in dialogue with somebody. And then Andre's response is, yeah, that's how I used to experience it too, as telling of one's inner thoughts. But I actually think what it is now, I think it's more of a dialogue. The soliloquy is more of a dialogue. It's a conversation with the audience. Often the characters are presenting a problem to the audience, and they're trying to work out. And the only people who can help them is the audience, because they're the only people who know what's happened in the play so far. In thinking about them in this way, it makes it much more active and immediate. I imagine it like as though they are inside my head. They are thoughts inside of my head, and I'm contacting each of those thoughts. I was so touched by that, because it approximates the experience that I have doing teaching, talking about the Dharma. That it's far more interactive than is often acknowledged, and the field that we actually create together is potent, yeah. And so it does feel like I'm contacting you as a kind of thought, as an impression in my own heart, and that we're doing something together. Yeah. So it's in that spirit of connection that we practice this morning. So I invite you to take a posture that feels sustainable. So we'll sit together till maybe about the top of the hour. And sensing the porousness of your own mind. In your mind, you're in mine. Of course, there are times of loneliness, but we're never exactly alone. And when we gather in Sangha, we celebrate the non-aloneness. The give and take that is any life. The openness and interpenetration of being. We are so porous, the world runs right through us. Let that be so. Physical sensations, emotional sensations, sounds, images, thoughts. Let it all run right through you. And on its way through you, be blessed with awareness. In any moment, in every moment, we can bless something with awareness. We greet the flood of experience as friends, on their way through. Deeply relaxed, deeply alert. We only truly feel alone when we're identified with the content of our own thoughts. Kind of subtle alienation in being identified. We bestow a lot of hospitality on our thoughts and neglect the many other visitors. Rumi says the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. Maybe one of those secrets is the experience of connectedness. These last couple minutes, just sensing into this theme, porousness. My mind is not my own. Interdependence. So thank you. Good to sit with you. So we'll have some walking or movement practice if you have injury or mobility limitations. But I'll say a few words about that. So yeah, you'll see the video of the walking hall, and we can join in our own way. And so a few considerations. Just I'll say a couple words about walking practice. You want to have walking practice is something of a bridge between sitting practice and daily life practice, because we're introducing the visual field, and we're introducing a lot of sensation in the movement, and so there's more to there's more input in a way, and that can actually be, even though it seems like we can get bored doing walking, actually can be actually overstimulating in a way that it's there's so much that's evoked in the visual field, especially, that we want to find ways of being simple with our practice. And so the first consideration is, what's the kind of aperture of the attention? How tightly, narrowly, or broadly do we wish to focus? And so it might be quite broad, the whole body, or it might even be the whole body and the visual field is essentially the anchor for attention. Or it might be much more a kind of smaller aperture, so just your feet, or sometimes I'll do just one toe on each foot. I'll attend to the sensations in that toe. And if there is some sense of boredom, the usual response is we reach out, we reach into other sensory domains, we reach into thinking as a way of creating a certain kind of companionship. But here in the walking practice, we reach down more deeply into the sensations of walking. And there's a measure of renunciation that may be involved, or there may be just a kind of the flow and ease, delight of awareness meeting sensation. And sometimes it can be useful to have do some gentle noting of left, right, or even more narrowly into lifting, swinging, placing. But this is a way of spotlighting particular experience within the attentional field. And relax and enjoy the movement, the change in posture, and don't worry so much what's happening in your mind. Just make a kind of balanced effort, and that has its own kind of karmic reverberations as we reconvene and sit together. So let's see, it is about 10 after. So let's do half an hour of walking practice. So we'll reconvene at 10:40 California time. I think that's maybe 7:40 in Denmark. I think I saw somebody from Denmark. Welcome. You'll hear a bell to call us back. We'll have a sit together and do be feel free to of course keep the YouTube window open. Be supported by resident volunteers doing some walking practice. So see you in half an hour, and happy to be together. So we'll just sit quietly together for about half an hour. I'll ring a bell at the end. So it's good to sit with you. So the Dharma said to be the middle path, the path, Majjhima Patipada, path between unwholesome extremes, right? So that famous distinction between, on the one end, self-mortification, and on the other end, self-indulgence. And it said that the path, the path we're walking, is the path between these two extremes, the middle path. But the middle path is also the path between wholesome extremes, not merely between unwholesome extremes. Meaning that the Dharma is not one. It's usually two. Yeah, it's found between wholesome forces, counterbalancing wholesome forces. And so there's effort and relaxation. We all know not to strive, right? We've been told not to strive, but in a way, huge effort is quite welcome. That's a part of the path, energetic vigor. And there's that can be wholesome. And there's also the other wholesome side of effortlessness, of that image that Gil sometimes uses of coasting in the kayak, yeah? The effortlessness of mindfulness in some modes, yeah? The kind of momentum and grace of the Dharma. Yeah, so these two wholesome extremes, energetic vigor, effortlessness. And there's love and wisdom, the cool clarity or the juicy love, yeah? The tender, sweet, soft love of the path, and the unruffled, cool, pristine clarity of the path of wisdom. There's a kind of balance between seriousness and play, that suffering is serious business. Suffering, yours, mine, that's serious. We take it seriously. And the kind of lightness, playfulness of the path should not be underestimated. Part of what we find is when we're not holding on so tightly, a moment of grief, seriousness can be followed by a moment of laughter, joy, lightness. And so we find our way between these wholesome extremes of seriousness and playfulness. And then the topic for this morning of compassion and equanimity, the balance between this dance between these two very wholesome factors of compassion and equanimity. I was reading T.S. Eliot last night, and There's that famous line to teach us to care and not to care. That sounds harsh, not to care. How do you stop caring, right? Is that some kind of abandonment of compassion, of the love that feels so vital, so integral to a balanced life? But we practice caring, acknowledge, and acknowledging that our wishes do not govern the First Noble Truth. And so I want to talk about how we find our way between these two, maybe we say wholesome extremes. Now, in seeking our balance, the first thing that I want to say is that there's nothing sacred about balance. It seems like there should be, but there's nothing actually sacred. It's important if we don't want to suffer, but there's nothing actually sacred about balance. In other words, you can do a lot. You can be very unbalanced in this, along this spectrum of compassion and equanimity. You can be very unbalanced and do a lot of good. And I raise this because in reflecting on this theme, I considered some of my moral heroes, and they're not living balanced lives. They're really not, and they suffer. But that doesn't mean that I want to write off their contributions to human welfare. Sometimes they are acting in a way out of compulsion. They're not balanced, but they're living beautiful lives. Yeah. And I've known people, I worked with people like this, I feel, of some scientists who are just single-mindedly devoted to their work that's meant to alleviate suffering, or social entrepreneurs and people in social movements who are doing beautiful work and have essentially thrown their weight entirely towards the side of compassionate engagement. And there may be some distortions in some of their behavior. But very beautiful, very worthy of reverence. Yeah. And so I don't even want to say balance is better than imbalance. But if we are to not suffer, balance is going to be important. If we're not going to spin out internally, balance is going to be important. And I don't want to prescribe where the balance point is. The balance point is not the same for everybody. And in fact, as we come to suffer less on this path, we become less preoccupied with ourselves. Energy is freed up. We can care more. Maybe we can lean more towards the side of compassionate engagement without becoming the heart becoming weathered. And so it changes over time how we actually bob and weave through these wholesome extremes. Some years ago, it was a long time ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was listening to a Dharma talk. The way, we sometimes listen to Dharma talks on audio, an audio file where we're like not exactly giving it full attention. It's a little like the background music of our life, just sort of the maybe just a reminder of the Dharma, a soothing quality of a teacher's voice that we care about. And so I was listening to a talk in this spirit, kind of busy doing something else, whatever. But a line from Shantideva was quoted. Mind, and it's Shantideva like speaking to their own mind, yeah, addressing their own mind, and said, mind, please understand you do not belong to me. And there was something about that cut through all of the busyness, the fragmentation in my attention in that moment. And I actually just like doubled over in tears. There was something about that. I don't even know the context, all of the meaning of that. But it was something, the way I heard it was like, mind, please understand you belong to the welfare of all human beings. That's a very beautiful sentiment, even to voice. And I thought about Joseph Goldstein at the Insight Meditation Society. I was sitting a retreat where he was one of the teachers, and Joseph, who spent a fair amount of time doing Tibetan practice, and then in a way looped back, in a sense, integrated that into a Theravadan insight meditation vision. And Joseph was asked how were those years practicing with Tibetan teachers? How did they impact you in your leadership at IMS? And his response was that the main impact was that he made a move to centralize compassion, to bring compassion to the forefront of the Dharma as it's offered in that institution. And increasingly, without compassion, the path can almost feel like greed. Yeah, when I really consider it, it's like more and more happiness for me. And I've been happy enough for a long time. And I don't know, how I want to think about fiddling with the subtle kilesas, yeah, the subtle defilements, right? Like how urgent is it that I actually release my clinging to bliss? Yeah, that's a little decadent to spend too much time doing that, I feel. And so the counterbalancing force is compassion, yeah. And it's not to be dismissive of the subtleties of some of the work, but it's like, yeah, I can start to feel unbalanced without the beating heart of compassion animating one's practice. Dzigar Kangtrul Rinpoche said, you cannot stop having deep love and care for sentient beings if you really want to suffer no longer within your own self-centered emotions. Secretly, you have to fall in love with sentient beings. Secretly, you have to fall in love with sentient beings. That movement of the heart captures something important. So we develop compassion, compassionate motivations, the willingness to act, to engage, to refrain from harm. We develop this by knowing suffering intimately. Dukkha is to be comprehended, it's to be known. We know it intimately in awareness, the pain, the pain of change, the pain of a subtle alienation, the relentlessness of samsara, sankhara dukkha. We come to know these different species of suffering in experience with clarity, with care. Mindfulness, in other words, it highlights suffering. Suffering, in a sense, is our only problem. And in a way, wherever there's suffering, there must be sila, there must be care. And there's suffering everywhere. And so there's sila everywhere. Now, when we hear compassion, just that word, it feels like, oh, okay, another demand is going to be made on me. And, in times of duress, in times when who knows all the things you might be contending with, I don't presume to know. But there are times, of course, when we want to say, just like, look, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I'm just trying to tend to my own heart here. And there's not energy to give. And that's very understandable. And so in those times, it can feel like, oh, another demand is being made on me. I don't have energy to give. The writer Kundera said, there's nothing heavier than compassion. Not even one's own pain weighs so heavily as the pain one feels with someone, for someone. A pain intensified by the imagination and prolonged by 100 echoes. So it's true that living in the face of suffering can burn us out. I don't want to be idealistic. There's an interesting finding like that people tend to down-regulate their compassionate responding when they're confronted with enormous need, enormous suffering. Yeah, so if you show one person in need, there's a strong empathic response. But if you show 1,000, the empathy is decreased, the compassionate response is decreased, and it's like the cruel logic of our own biology or something that the heart feels overwhelmed, even though the more rational response in a way is for the compassion to rise up, to be more in the face of more need, to be stronger when we see 1,000 in need rather than just one. And sometimes we do hear about compassion fatigue among people providing care, among doctors or nurses, or it could be anybody, parents, all, people who are for whom others depend, on their their offerings, their care. But I think it's relevant to consider the distinction that's made between compassion and empathic distress. And this has been traced out other places, but Tanya Singer being one of the people involved with this. And so she describes empathic distress as self-oriented and negative affect, negative emotion, versus compassion, which is actually other-oriented and positive. So she writes, we propose that the term compassion fatigue is slightly misleading since it suggests that caregivers are tired of feeling too much compassion, whereas the definition we use implies that the feeling of compassion should actually protect against burnout. We argue that the term compassion fatigue should be replaced by empathic distress fatigue. Instead of abstaining from empathic responses altogether, caregivers in general should aim at maintaining high levels of empathy and learn how to transform empathy into compassion and loving kindness before being trapped by empathic distress. And so the question, like, how do you transform empathy into compassion before getting trapped in empathic distress? And her answer is something like meditate. Yeah. And but it's kind of like, I already do that. I already do meditate and I'm burnt out, right? Or we might feel that. Yeah. So it's tricky. I don't know how to navigate some of this realm. It does feel like at times, like our nervous system wasn't quite designed for the depth of compassion needed in this moment, maybe in any moment. But we can step up. We can start to release our own pain. This is part of the value of our own practice. We start to release our own pain, and as we release more and more of our pain, the pain of the world no longer resonates with our wounds, but with our heart. And that's different. That's different. Yeah. We practice metabolizing our own pain, and then the kind of the mesh of our being starts to open in such a way that the pain of the world is no longer resonating with our own wounds, but with our heart. And that feels different. Our own practice begins to open and vitalize our own being. We become more comfortable with the wholesome grieving involved in compassion, involved in Dharma practice. And so we get more comfortable in those waters as we practice. The grieving itself becomes more comfortable. Pema Chodron said, grief is completely pregnant with bodhicitta, with a kind of awakened heart. We get more comfortable with this. And we cultivate a kind of deep love, a deep love. Compassion is love, is the movement of love. This is Matthew Ricard To generate compassion, imagine a loved one who is experiencing excruciating physical or mental pain. Deeply sense her suffering as if it was your own until this becomes unbearable. At this point, turn to an unconditional feeling of love for this person. Imagine taking gently the person in your arms. Visualize that every atom of her suffering is now filled with love. Wish from my heart that this person might be free from suffering. Compassion is a form of love, and love doesn't hurt. Clinging hurts, yeah, but love doesn't hurt. This gets muddled, and I don't know if they can ever be completely untangled, the love and the clinging. But love doesn't hurt. Yeah. Something Thich Nhat Hanh emphasized, love. Love doesn't hurt. So there's the compassion side, and then the equanimity side, which is perhaps an attempt, maybe the equanimity is an attempt to untangle clinging from love. We usually talk about equanimity in a different context. I talk about equanimity often as a facet of mindfulness itself, or as a conjoined factor, something that is actually important to make mindfulness function well, usefully. And so talk about equanimity as the kind of absence of compulsion to act out our preferences. Not the absence of preference, but the absence of compulsion to act out our preferences. That's the usual way that I talk about it. But and it's important, as we always do, to distinguish equanimity and passivity. That equanimity is a kind of is a radical willingness to be visited by sensory experience, to not stand guard, to be visited, to let the world rush into awareness. It is not, and so in this sense, it is a momentary acceptance of sensory experience. It is not a stance of passivity with respect to the world. And so this moment's equanimity does not connote the next moment's passivity. We don't know what wisdom suggests, action or passivity. Yeah, it's this moment. We permit it. We permit the arising and intensification and plateau and the fading and the dissolution of sensory experience. We do not interfere in that process. This is the kind of the radical permission that is given for the tides of pleasure and pain to wash through our system. That is not indifference to the world. That is a stance with relation to sensory experience. That's the usual way we talk about equanimity. But here, as a counterbalancing force to compassion, it is maybe a little different. And it is something like an acknowledgement that my wishes do not govern samsara. My wishes do not govern samsara. There's a way in which can almost be a kind of grandiosity that creeps into our compassion. And so I think of these reflections on equanimity in part as a kind of counterbalance to utopian fantasies, a counterbalance to the fantasy that we might ever dismantle the First Noble Truth. Yeah. And so it can be helpful. Sometimes it's like I try to zoom out to catch a kind of bigger view, a bigger view. We are here like on this very mediocre planet, yeah, in a very tiny corner of the galaxy at this blink-like fragment of geological time, of cosmological time, right? And so I was reading a little astronomy, and it said our galaxy is located at one end of the local group, a small cluster of galaxies with the Andromeda galaxy at the other end. The local group is near the outskirts of the local supercluster, which has a diameter of 100 million light years. This somewhat flattened supercluster consists of two major hot dog-shaped groups of galaxies. The biggest supercluster is the Perseus-Pegasus filament, which contains the Perseus supercluster and stretches for roughly 1 billion light years. A number of other superclusters and voids are known, but astronomers have only mapped the large structure of a small part of the universe. There may even be larger scale structures. Amidst the Perseus Pegasus supercluster, here I am in Berkeley, worried about my emails. Is there a greater folly, than the kind of narrowness of our concerns, And that kind of way of zooming way out, does not erase compassion, but it provides a different context. The movement to improve humanity, our species, our sila, the kind of sila as it constellates at the group level, this movement is always multi-generational. I really remember that kind of moment, Ruth King was doing a training some years ago on race, and she told us it's like multi-generational, and that's not to absolve us of responsibility now, but to take a bigger view. It's hard to see past the horizon of our own death, but all the movements of goodness extend beyond it. And so we zoom out in space and time These reflections on equanimity perhaps help distill some of the distortions from our compassion. Sometimes our compassion has a kind of compulsive, maybe avoidant quality to it. And so we might ask the question, what would we have to face in ourselves if we stopped helping for a moment? What would we have to face in ourselves? That doesn't mean we should stop helping, but we want to know the answer to that question. Sometimes it seems like I'm trying to help someone, but what's actually happening at the level of sensory experience is that I simply cannot tolerate the distress that their pain evokes in me. And that is a different kind of engagement. That's maybe not true compassion, yeah? Yeah, because in a way there's a very self-oriented theme to that intervention, yeah? And so I want to learn, okay, what am I actually being asked to open to? What grief am I being asked to open to? And if I bring in these reflections on equanimity, okay, what do I have to make peace with in my own heart? And how can that actually inform my compassionate engagement? Empathy, compassion, it is fatiguing when we are over-identified with the pain of the other. It's fatiguing. And this happens a lot in the closest relationships within families and people we love, where the pain of the other is so evocative. It spins us in such a deep way, and we get fogged in. There's a kind of opaque quality to our minds when we're really spun by the suffering of another, when we're overly identified with their pain, that we engage in ways that are unhelpful. And so some of the equanimity, like I do not govern samsara, may be helpful in actually purifying, clarifying our care, our compassion. So I'll just say a couple more things, and if you wish, you can put some questions. We'll have a few minutes for questions in the chat. Carl Rogers famously said, accurate empathic understandings means that the therapist is completely at home in the universe of the patient. It's a moment-to-moment sensitivity that is in the here and now, the immediate present. It is a sensing of the client's inner world of private personal meanings, as if it were the therapist's own, but without ever losing the as-if quality. Without ever losing the as-if quality. If we lose the as-if quality, empathy devolves in something like emotional contagion. Yeah, it becomes boundaryless in a way that's not so helpful. And so we come back to peace, to silence, to a happiness that is independent of the future. We come back to this, and this informs our care. The equanimity informs the care. We weave back and forth. Yeah, we weave back and forth through these wholesome extremes of compassion, of equanimity. When we're in the realm of compassion, we make it really count. When we're in the realm of equanimity, we make it really count. It's not a half equanimity or a half-hearted compassion. It's our full heart devoted in a moment to compassion, our full heart devoted in a moment to equanimity. And between these two wholesome extremes, we find our life. So I offer this for your consideration. So any questions, inquiries are most welcome in the chat. It's lovely to see so many familiar names, and yeah, I'll keep my eyes open in the chat. We have 5 minutes or so. So Alan, maybe something on the as if quality as it relates to emptiness. Yeah. We can know these states of union or non-differentiation, these states of where the entire world of experience is one Ganzfeld or something, like it's one field. But even in that, there is the as if quality can be maintained. There's incredible intimacy, but it is not alluding to the collapse of all distinctions. I think that's sometimes a misperception in the kind of celebration of some of the kind of mystical insights around non-duality or non-separation. So I do feel like that as if quality does not diminish the depth of intimacy, but we want to keep it. Otherwise, I do think we can it devolves into a kind of emotional contagion. Yeah, Susan saying my moral heroes are indeed unbalanced, yet they keep going. It's yeah, it's very beautiful. Even just not even knowing who they are, just to hear that phrase, moral heroes. Yeah, they keep going. How beautiful is that? They keep going. Yeah, they are maybe not leading balanced lives. Maybe there's a lot of suffering. Maybe there's a lot of fatigue or something like this. And still, it's like uh, they're heroes. Yeah. And so I don't want to fetishize balance either. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. 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 Phil asking, are these really extremes? What is the continuum they exist on? They feel like different pieces of a bigger thing. Yeah. Yeah. That may be right. Yeah, there may be a way in which the equanimity infuses the compassion infuses the equanimity, and some of the distinctions we make maybe are not so useful, but there is some sense of okay, what is a life of care look like given the depth of suffering? What does it look like? What is the relative place of rest and opening, of engagement and refuge, of compassionate action and soothing or solitude? How do we actually make our care? How do we purify our care? Make it count more? And how does the endlessness of dukkha, the endlessness of samsara, not become yet another reason to compromise the depth of peace on offer in this path? So, for whatever it's worth, offer this. And thank you um, to you all for being there, and to the crew at IRC behind the scenes helping. And so see Ruth Bader Ginsburg getting some love in there. Oh, that's good. Anyway, yeah, thank you all. Good to be with you. I'm going to turn it over to Doug, who will introduce the uh, uh, optional small group activity, and yeah, and if you care to support IRC, support me, there's a link for donations. That's most welcome. And look forward to seeing you. Well, not seeing you, but kind of seeing you on YouTube again. So thanks all. Okay, Doug, please.
Thank you, Matthew. So that was great. These half-day retreats are really, something very special, and particularly now, in the time when online is what we have, to be able to offer half-day retreats is really great.
Our next upcoming retreat will be on Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we will do what we are calling our mini retreats at 10 o'clock. And Andrea Castillo will be teaching. And so for those who are able to join us, we would definitely invite you to come. But now I'm going to turn you over to Lish, who will be managing our community time. So our community time will be a chance for you all to gather and talk. If you're on YouTube currently, you want to move into Zoom. So you'll see there's a Zoom link towards the middle of the introduction information on YouTube. So if you go onto that link and join Lish on Zoom, then that'll be a chance to talk. So I'm hoping that Lish is out there somewhere, and I will turn things over to her. I think she's coming. I see signs on my computer that she may be there. Hello, Lish.
Yeah, so if folks want to move on over to Zoom, we'll see you there. Otherwise, YouTube is signing off, and we will be having another retreat next Wednesday and hope to see you then.
Thank you.